All right, so the title of the session is really about copyright and making the meme ecosystem better, and how do we defend it from whatever's. As the meme ecosystem and internet culture grows bigger, there'll be more people who are trying to use the old models on the new system, and how do we defend it and things like that. But I'm also more than happy to answer questions that you guys have about what we do, how we do it, and if I can explain how to make your business work or whatever, more than happy to help you guys as well. So if you guys follow the SOPA debate, it's kind of fascinating because you had two people. It was like watching the debate on abortion, right? Two people who had opposing views who can't seem to agree even on what they were actually disagreeing about, right? So you had the internet crowd coming out and saying, look, there's a technology issue, there's freedom of speech, and you've got the big media companies saying it's about money and it's about jobs. And what was really interesting, though, was that when it came to politics, the freedom of speech things didn't really matter as much as creating jobs. And that was what was fascinating about the learning there, is that in a recession and an economy like this, the politicians only responded to, how do I get reelected? And we had a really hard time learning this because we are so much more, how do you say this, idealistic about the world, and how we wanted to be more about freedom of speech. How do we want to be more about making sure that people can reach all the creative elements on the internet and things like that. So when we learned that, it was rather disheartening, because it was clear that we were unable to educate Congress on how the internet really worked. It was very clear that we were unable to actually get them to understand that the future of job creation and the future of the US economy is only going to come from our ability to actually generate more creative content. The United States has been a net exporter of creative content for the last century. No country in the world dominates more on the export of creative materials to elsewhere. And if you were in the last session with Where the Hell is Matt, he was talking about how in Saudi Arabia, he was trying to get them to communicate and say, I want to teach you a dance. And he said Looney Tunes. And these people in the middle of the desert in Saudi Arabia knew what Looney Tunes was. And when he arrived, they were watching Oprah. And so if you think about this 20 years ahead, the kinds of companies that are going to be exporting culture to the rest of the world aren't going to be doing it mainly through television. Television will obviously exist, but the vast majority of the world will experience the internet for the first time on these. And this is going to have a profound impact and change in how we actually export culture from the United States out. And I'm not just saying export of culture like Hot Tub Time Machine, the movie, right? That's bullshit, right? It's meaningless entertainment for the sake of meaningless entertainment. So what you really want to do is, if you want to give people the power to actually make content, it's actually the crap, it's actually the things that you don't think is highbrow that is going to have a bigger impact on society. Because for the last 50 years, when it comes to mass media, we were actually going to be witnessing a change in who decides what is quality. Quality is no longer a bunch of people in a studio willing to actually put together money and saying, we're going to actually go and fund a $100 million movie that we think might make a profit and have copyright and restrictions that guarantee us some return. That model no longer works. It's not about putting money up front first and then figuring out how to extract them from the commons later. Because that's how copyright is actually created today. It's about lifetime plus 90 years of copyright enforcement in order for me to get as much money out of the system. What the internet is doing is it's turning that model upside down by saying we don't know what quality is, but we can talk meritocratically about what is quality. And quality is the enjoyment people have, whether it's misspelled captions on cats, or if it's people's videos where they get kicked in the nuts, or if it's a rage comic that is very poorly drawn, right? That's not what quality content seems like to a lot of people, yet that's what we as society is beginning to believe is quality content. And what's happening is that you might not be able to watch a 2-hour video on this phone, but you can certainly scroll through a bunch of websites and be really entertained by the fact that we are now a participant in the culture that we create. That if we actually go in and we actually are able to share a little bit about ourselves, we're actually creating our version of Seinfeld. Like Rage Comics is like today's Seinfeld. It's about the most mundane shit. Like I went to class and the teacher gave me an assignment and said it's due in a week and it's a 600-page book, Lasai. Like it's not that funny, except We all have had that experience, and the commonality of our experience is what drives internet culture and memes. And unfortunately, this isn't blockbuster TV material. It isn't something the studios can spend $100 million on. So while they ratchet up their copyrights, we start to see a disconnect between how intellectual property started. Intellectual property as a concept did not come from the idea that you can treat a piece of idea like you could a microphone. That intellectual property should be created so that people have a limited incentive that expires at some point, and that incentive causes people to put their ideas forth into the commons. And so when intellectual property was first invented as an idea and it was passed into legislation, copyrights and patents were given a 14-year limited right. While patents have stayed at 14 to 21 years, copyrights have gone from that to a lifetime plus 90 years. For some reason, we have said patents, the idea of publishing an idea into a business form or into a practical form is actually protectable only for 14 years. If you create a piece of content, it effectively, for us, is forever. In other words, Star Wars will never be in the public domain as far as we are concerned because we will be dead by then. I don't know how that happened. I don't know where it went from intellectual property as an idea and an incentive to put things into the commons versus let's make sure people get their money back for Hot Tub Time Machine. And I'm not exactly sure how anyone believes that that's really a good thing for society, except I think we got into this trap called intellectual property. The words that you use to describe it is really making people think about ideas as if it were physical property. No one owns a meme. Everyone owns a meme, right? The idea of a meme itself is that it is an idea that is transmitted from person to person. So the nature of creating a meme says that if you cannot transmit it from person to person, in other words, if more people who are unassociated are not involved in the transmission of a meme, then it is by definition not a meme. And that's some of the challenges that we run into, is that if you cannot pass an idea virally, it is of no value. Therefore, the value of where memes come in actually falls on companies like us, whose job is to distribute the content. And that's why actually we are able to make a business, is that unfortunately, a lot of the content in memes are replaceable. They're commodity. So you saw when Jonathan Zittrain talked about the privilege-denying dude, right? They used a stock photo, and the stock photo company objected to it. And so somebody else stepped in and said, I'll be that guy. The funny thing is, that dude looked nothing like the original guy in the stock photo. Yet the idea of that meme still worked. That macro still worked because we realized that content at many levels is a complete commodity. If you look at Keyboard Cat the meme, Fatso the video languished in obscurity for a very long period of time. And when that language, like no one really cared about that video until this guy named Brad O'Farrell showed up out of nowhere and actually started splicing two copyrighted material together to form something totally transformative. Yet Brad gets very little recognition versus the original Keyboard Cat because biologically we are wired to look at the piece of content and say, aha, I identify with that piece of content. Therefore, that piece of content and the representation of that cat is the celebrity. Scumbag Steve, the meme, has virtually nothing to do with Blake Boston, the person. But if you walk around today, you will see that Blake Boston is the guy who is the celebrity, yet he had no meritable experience or part of that process because we are biologically wired to look at the image and say, I identify with the person in that image. It is the epitome of what a celebrity is. Because you are seen in front of millions of people, you are now the famous person, regardless of whether you had anything to do with the meritable distribution of that content. And so, whereas internet culture becomes more mainstream, we are seeing ourselves somewhat devolve back into the way popular culture worked, which is the guy I see on television or the guy I see in a meme on Reddit is the guy that I identified with, and therefore that person is a celebrity. As much as we talk about appreciating content creators, I believe we're actually hardwired to do the opposite, whereas we identify with the media and not the creator itself. So I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, but it's something that we as people who are part of internet culture need to understand, that we sometimes have to fight biology and fight the way we think about memes, because if you want to actually give credit to the people who created the memes, sometimes it's impossible to find. Sometimes it's very difficult to identify. But you have to understand that we have to build systems, not just have a feeling about it, but we have to build systems for recognizing people and giving credit where it belongs.